Welcome to the Manufacturing Shakeup. We're your hosts, Ellen Feldman-Ornato
and Jenny Drescher. We're talking with dynamic women from across the manufacturing scene in Connecticut.
Hey, it's almost the new year. And I know you've already joined the gym and you have 400 pages of goals that you'd like to achieve by the end of first quarter. And I know that you've already gone through all your closets and gotten rid of the things you haven't worn for 2 years. And I know that you are a very ambitious bunch of people out there in listener land. But here's the thing. Goals are just the beginning. Writing it down, joining the gym is just the beginning of actually making changes in our behavior that make a qualitative difference in our life. So today, I'm going to ask you, Jenny.
Me?
Yeah, you. Good. Hi. What's one thing, if you think about the things that you'd like to accomplish in the upcoming year, you know, the big, fat, hairy, audacious goals that you have for yourself, or maybe even just a teeny tiny one, what's one thing that's really important to you to start to when you get to the end of 2024-5, you say, I did it. Go me.
Yeah, I did it. Go me. And, I'm going to make a note of that because actually I think we should use that any time that we get to the end of a quarter. I did it. Go me. I kind of like that. That's so easy to remember. So I want to get to the end of 2025 and say, I did it. Go me about my personal visibility. So one of my roles at Boulder Company, as any of our clients out there know, is that I do our program design. So I spend a lot of my time behind my computer working on learning, developing the learning programs that we teach. And the problem with being behind your computer is that, it's in the house. It's not out in the world. So Ellen is our resident whiz here at the Shake Up and at the Boulder Company for working the magic of networking. And if you've heard our previous episodes on networking, you may know that that's kind of a shy point for me. And so I want to become more visible in 2025. And I have to be honest, I'm not totally clear what that looks like. It's just sort of a unformed idea still at this stage.
Terrific. So let's start there. So you acknowledge that you spend a lot of time behind the desk. You acknowledge that you're doing all of our content design, which is largely unseen except for the people who are on the receiving end of it, and that you need to increase your visibility. So why is that important to you? I think that's the first step when you're setting a big goal, is to figure out why does that matter to you?
I think it matters to me because in our business, we've had sort of an imbalance, because when one person is tasked with too much of one thing, it creates an imbalance in the force. So, it's not fair to you as my partner in crime to have you be the person that's always having to be responsible for being out and sort of branding for our company and branding for our Shake Up. And so it's important to me to sort of help do my part, help do my share when it comes to the visibility of our brand. I think it also matters for me because sometimes I feel a little unseen, right? Like it sounds absurd. Of course I'm unseen, I'm behind a computer. But I mean, I think that when we spend too much of our time behind the computer or behind a machine, as I know a lot of our friends out there in listener land are behind machines as well, it starts to eat away at my personal sense of satisfaction about how I'm showing up in the world. Like it erodes my, literally, do I feel invisible sometimes because I behave that way, because I am behind my computer all the time. And I don't want to feel invisible. I have things I want to contribute. I have things that I have magic I want to work. I have people I want to meet. I want more people to meet and more friends to make. And
Okay. So for your own personal satisfaction, but also for the branding of the company, what I hear is that you want to more closely align the branding of the company with both you and me. And for the folks who are listening to this, I want you to be thinking, we want you to be thinking of, what's my goal? Why is it important to me? What's not happening now that this is what I'm setting as my goal, right? So for Jenny, we just heard that she wants to be more visible for herself, to feel like she's more out in the world and being seen. And also the larger purpose is it's important for our organization that both of us be known equally out in the world. Okay. So then if that's your goal, and we know why it's important to you, then what do you think are some practical, let's think about like for first quarter of 2025, what are some practical strategies that you think you can start to employ to increase your visibility? What are some things that you think you can be out there trying to do?
I mean, I guess the obvious sort of low-hanging fruit is just to look at the schedules of the organizations that I'm already a part of, that we are a part of, like Women in Manufacturing, or Manufacturer CT is a place we love to hang out, or CBIA, or any of the other great organizations. I think that's kind of, honestly, that's sort of the surface level. What I think might be more interesting and might make it more fun for me would be, yes, I can go ahead and load my calendar full of those things, but I think it's also important to add the things I'm not thinking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we really want to magnetize the people that we most want in our world, be it new friends or great clients or new listeners, whoever it may be, that means, I think, being out in the world doing the things that we love that allow us to show up most fully as who we are. Mm-hmm. So what that might look like for me would be, yes, the normal business networky stuff, but I'm also very creative and very engaged in the arts. And recently I've been missing singing, for example. I've spent years as a choral singer, and I haven't had time recently to be in a choral group. I don't want to commit to being in a choral group because that's a promise I can't keep. But maybe I could investigate what might be around locally that I could dip my toe into from an arts perspective, maybe with singing or a pottery class or something like that, and drag some of my wing people with me, my wing women.
Mm-hmm. I love that you say that, because I was I did a pottery class with my daughter a couple of years ago, completely outside the scope of normal networking. And I met somebody who ran a manufacturing facility. Right. She was potting right next to me, and we talked manufacturing and training and development. And we also talked pottery, and she was much better at it than I was. So I was always watching her in awe. But so that's a little less traditional route. And that's something to think about also as you're listening to this podcast. Is there are the obvious things that you can do, the things you can read about. You can read a million articles or ask ChatGPT, how do I get more visible in my community? The question is, what resonates with you? Because that's what you'll be attracted to and go to with a level of enthusiasm and engagement that actually makes you want to be there and makes other people experience you in that best way possible. So if you think of even the professional organizations that we're associated with, are there pieces and parts of those organizations and the things they do that are most aligned with what you like to do for enjoyment? And I'll give you an example. I went on a hike with NOMA CT, which is I can't remember the acronym stands for, I think it's the Northeast Organization for Minority Architects. Yeah, I went on a hike with them. Mm-hmm. I had the most amazing conversations, really increased my relationships in that group, and had a great time networking with those folks. So that's the kind of thing that you're talking about, is finding something that appeals to you that's also aligned with the group, and to start doing that. I think that women in manufacturing should start a hiking group, actually, now that we're sitting
here. I
would
jump in to volunteer for that. I would volunteer for that. I would start that hiking group.
Let's do that.
I think a lot of women in manufacturing, or Manufacturer CT, or CBIA, or any of these other great organizations would be on that.
Or Concept, or any of them. And so here's a question for you. What will you use as your metric for succeeding? Like, because one of the things that we always like to encourage folks to do is like, how will you know that you're getting there? How will you know you're succeeding? So, and also, how will you give yourself permission to maybe have not so great nights that don't throw you off the track?
So what will my evidence be, as we sometimes say in coaching? Well, will my evidence be that I've gotten more visible? So if I don't look at that from a whole year perspective, because that feels very daunting and awful. Like, what if I just only look at it as, like you said, quarter one? How would I be if I got to the end of Q1 and I said, yeah, I feel like I'm making headway on visibility. My evidence would be that I could look back at my calendar and see that I had done these fun things in these fun places. It might be that I've had some coffee dates or happy hours with new folks that I feel more connected to, more interested in, like where there's a nice, what we sometimes call a value exchange between me and the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So maybe I would be able to look back on that quarter and say, hey, look, I've got this new friend and this new acquaintance and this new business buddy. And I would maybe be able to name those people. And
Right.
maybe I'd be able to articulate what is intriguing to me, or what is the value exchange that we're sharing that's helping us both to feel more in connection, more in community, and more engaged with one another. So,
Right.
you know, I'm thinking about the first time I met our friend Jess Mand, who runs a little marketing shop over in Glastonbury called In Demand Communications. And I remember when I met Jess, which was back in 2019, she and I just clicked really well. And I specifically remember towards the end of 2019 saying, oh, I made this new friend and we have these things in common. And here's what I like sharing in that conversation. So
Okay.
as I'm thinking about that, I'm suddenly realizing maybe there's just an aspect of reflection that's helpful about any relationship that we make that helps advance the journey of visibility.
Yes, exactly. So we have to look at, what are the meetings that we had? Did we have coffee? Do we have a new relationship? Has that relationship caused something else to happen? Right. Very often I'll meet somebody at out in the world. It's not even necessarily at a networking event that leads to a next conversation that leads to a different association or a different organization that wasn't even on my radar at all.
Mm,
Right. We're just walking through the world, opening doors
mm,
and welcoming the people who come in is how I see a lot of the networking that we do. It's not like I'm not going there in order to, and we've talked about that on previous podcasts. So if this is the goal, is to increase your visibility, to specifically pursue going to events that are aligned with what you like to do,
mhm,
and are attractive to you. And that doesn't mean that you're not attending things that are bigger events with a ton of people where you might make a conversation, but you're giving yourself the freedom to opt into things that are more aligned with your areas of interest. Because there are some very big events that we go to where it's not necessarily the sweet spot for either of us in terms of what we would choose from an intimacy standpoint of actually meeting and being able to talk to people. And it's still important to the company from a see and be seen. And for those of you who are listening to this, what are the critical places where you need to show up in your organization? What meetings can you figure out how to be involved with? What ERGs might you want to join? Or professional associations, so that you raise your own visibility if that's something that's important to you. How will you pursue your own things? And then, Jenny, from a behavior standpoint, like we always say that you can't just talk about it, right? There has to be a behavioral practice behind it, something that you can practice on a daily basis, even if it's even 10 minutes of reflection, 5 minutes of reflection. So, what kind of thing do you think you could put in place to help keep you on track to meet your goal?
um, I think for me, what it would have to be would be understanding understanding what are the aspects of the gap that I'm in. So one of the tools that we are fond of here at Boulder is this idea called the aspiration gap, which is, we talked about at the end of the year, but it bears repeating, which is recognizing this space of where I'm at and where I want to be. And those things, that pathway, putting those pavers down means looking carefully at, what am I doing right now? What is the behavior I'm engaging in right now that maybe I need to reduce and replace with something else? So I think for me, in the context of this goal of visibility, I think my tendency, if I'm honest with myself, my tendency is to just follow the rabbit hole of whatever it is that I'm working on. And then next thing I know, it's very easy to not stand up and get up and go out. And I think that happens to a lot of folks. I'm sure there are many of you out there who recognize that behavior in yourselves. So I think I need to look at a replacement behavior for when I am, instead of, like when I know that I have a networking event on my calendar, instead of working all the way up until the very last minute, which is going to make it really easy for me to bail on that activity. I think my goal would be to say, instead of doing that, I will charge up my energy, reflect for 5 minutes about what I want to gain from getting my ass out from behind the computer. Right? Like reconnect to that why. So yes. I think that's what it is instead of following the impulse to say, well, I can just work on this one more thing. Instead of that, I will say, wait, hold on. That one thing is still going to be on your to-do list tomorrow, the next day, because we never get it done, right? We always have a list. I don't want to be ruled by a list. But I could say, but it is important to me to be making meaningful connections in the world and finding more relationships where there is good, nourishing exchange, whether they be business or personal, whatever kind of relationships those are. So I think that's what it is for me, is to reconnect to that why more often. That's a behavior I can repeat.
That is a behavior that you can repeat. From my side of the equation, because I do go a lot of these in the evening, I've started to add a hard stop to my calendar at 3:30 in the afternoon to give myself time to have a bite to eat and to hydrate and to rest a little bit before I go out onto the next thing. And I realize that I have the latitude to do that. And some people who are listening may not be able to end their day at 3:30. But remember, I'm picking up at 5 o'clock and I'm probably going until 9 o'clock by the time I get home. So the more important question is, how do you set yourself up for success? If for you, it's reflecting on your why, and that helps you engage. For me, it's actually physically creating a space between what I'm doing now and what I'm hoping to achieve later on, so that I have more energy for that. And also listening to really good music on the way there and not defaulting to my local radio station, which is all doom and gloom and stuff like that, right? Like intentionally feeding my brain and my energy with things that will have me positioned for success there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pull that thread, because so out there in listener land, I hope that you have a pen, because here's your homework. No, I'm just kidding. We don't do homework. We only do home play here at the Shake
Home play.
Home play. So
play with us.
You just heard Ellen give me an interview, and we're going to just outline real quick before we close this episode. We'll call them our shake-up factors, but it's actually 4 keys that you can try on in any area of your life where you're trying to cause improvement for yourself in 2025. So there were 4 beats to that interview. First one was, what is the thing that I want and why do I want it? Really getting at that big burning why. If you're a fan of Simon Sinek, this is something that should feel familiar for you. If not, go look up his 8-minute TEDx talk. It continues to be marvelous, even though it's probably 20 years old at this point. Step 2 is to look beyond the obvious answers. I really like that you asked me about that, Ellen, and we were able to ferret that out, because our brain and our intellect are the ones that will come up with those obvious answers. But we can get much richer answers if we dig a little bit past the obvious surface tactics and think more deeply about the emotional side of that, or the subtleties that may be evident there if we dig in. Three, the third piece that you asked me about was what will be my evidence. Third piece of success is evidence. What is the evidence that I will be looking for myself in my life? What when I stop to reflect at any given moment, whether it's a weekly or quarterly or year end, how will I know I've made some traction on that objective? And then what is the key behavior that I will engage in? So we've all done a million types of goal setting, but I think that this is usually one where we're missing the mark. I don't know, maybe y'all are out there in listener land are doing it better than we are, but I find that being able to really articulate 1 to 2 teeny tiny behaviors, micro behaviors that will help me to move in that direction will help me a lot. And then I also heard you allude to something that I will call shake-up factor number 5 in this process, which is just to not worry about trying to get it right. Just be comfortable with saying, oh, okay. So on those days that I might bail on an event, I'm not going to beat myself up. I can make myself that promise and be in integrity with it, because if I beat myself up for screwing that up, then I'm just dragging my own energy down. So I promise me I won't do that.
I love that. And I hope for the folks who are listening to this, that you have a goal in mind, and now you know that you have a 5-step process that you can use it to sort of pull it apart and put it back together in a way that makes it feel manageable for you, because it's chosen by you, instead of just a goal written on a sticky on your computer monitor where you don't actually have the action steps between now and getting there. Jenny, thank you for playing.
Yeah. One more thing that you just made me think about was you can layer this onto a SMART goal. So a bunch of people probably in the world use SMART goals all the time. I know I do. So I would challenge everybody to look past just your SMART goal and add this layer once you've built your SMART goal, if your goal is tactical.
Great ad. Thank you. All right, we're going to wrap this episode up. Thanks for playing on the Manufacturing Shakeup, Jenny Drescher.
Oh, thanks for the interview, Ellen. Now I know what to do. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.